And students who even now have to sort of write like an hour as a practice in class find it difficult. So they're complaining about sort of RSI type things, or my hand hurts, all that kind of stuff, because they're so used to doing or wanting to do everything online. So I think that's, you know, one of the sort of major issues for me is how to sort of strike that balance between, yes, students wanting to do things more electronically, and the fact of the matter is that they still have to write by hand. You know, in terms of the teaching side of things with English, I do, as the head of English, I do say to, you know, teachers and students, quite happy for you to do some research, obviously online, like look up some things, but I still want them to be able to take notes by hand, you know, sort of go through the actual steps of assignments or research that you probably need to be able to get to that end result better, not just cutting and pasting and then, oh, here's my homework or here's my assessment or whatever. Actually going through, looking things up, writing down notes by hand, kind of synthesizing things. Yes, putting it, like, you know, in an electronic format if you want to, but kind of still having a lot of that, you know, sort of focused element in terms of, you know, handwriting. So I think that's, so that's kind of a difficult sort of balance to strike. We've got students wanting to hand all of their coursework in electronically, so just sort of do it. But one of the problems with that is an increase in plagiarism. So it's a lot easier for students, obviously, if they're just, you know, typing something up just to kind of cut and paste something and pass it off as their own. So that's an issue. Also, handwriting is just deteriorating rapidly, and it is a skill to be able to actually write by hand. So the less students are doing it over time, the worse their handwriting is. So it's really difficult because we want to be, you know, still fostering that kind of, you know, ability or that skill. It's definitely a skill. And also even just with reading texts, like a lot of students just want to read a text off their iPad or a Kindle or, you know, something like that. And whilst it's got its merits, the real merits I think I see is if you're going travelling. But in a classroom, I'm still insisting, we've now got this new program called the IRP, which is the Independent Reading Program, still insisting that the very vast majority of students are actually reading books that they sort of hold in their hands. I feel like, and I think there's research to back this up as well, I don't think it's just my opinion, that the way that the words are imaged onto the brain is actually a little bit different than when you're sort of scrolling through a screen than when you're sort of turning the pages of a book. So I think it's important, you know, that we kind of try and maintain that, you know, for as long as we can, because otherwise books and pens and stuff are just going to be, you know, something that kind of in the old sort of dark ages. So I think it's important to kind of, to sort of still maintain some of those skills. I think for me, and I've been teaching here, this is my 10th year, so I've noticed a fair amount of change over the, you know, the course of that period. I think the main thing is, it's one thing to sort of have, you know, a level of comfort. So students obviously feel comfortable with devices. A lot of them speak through devices when they're interacting with their friends. For like the majority of the night, for example, barely anyone sort of calls each other to have a chat on the phone. They're constantly like, you know, messaging or whatever. So I think there's, you know, there's having that sort of comfort zone, but over the years I've seen that become much more of like much less of a passive thing and much more of an active, even sort of bordering on like an aggressive thing, where if you ask students to take out earphones or to get off their devices, they actually can get quite aggravated about it. And some students who are constantly asking, like over and over again, can I do that online? Can I like submit that online? Can I send you an email? Can I, where they don't really want to interact with you through any other medium rather than their device or other than their device. And so I just think that's like, you know, quite indicative of the fact that there's like a growing, not just trend, but a growing sort of addiction to the point where they look uncomfortable or aggravated if they're not going to actually be able to be on their devices. And even with so in most of my classes, I take the phones off them and put them in tubs, because otherwise every second person and their dog in the classroom is going to be like trying to get their phone out. But they're so highly cognizant of who's got their phone and when do they get their phone back, and you know, this kind of stuff. You certainly wouldn't get a student going, oh, like, I lost my pencil case. Oh my God, who's got my pencil case? It's like my tools for writing and communicating. What will I do?